Hello, welcome to the Business Spotlight. I'm Gary Crosby, and today I'm delighted to introduce to you Vicky Whiter. She is the CEO of Peter's Cleaners. Vicky, thanks for spending some time with me today.
You're welcome.
Let's start by giving the viewers, listeners, a little bit of context. Then tell us a little bit about Peter's Cleaners. What have you been up to?
Well, I bought Peter's Cleaners in 2017. It was established in 1963, but like many dry cleaners, wasn't making any money, and the owner had just decided to close. My view was there's always going to be a demand for dry cleaning and laundry. And it was the best kept local secret. There was no website, nobody knew anything about what they did. So to me, I thought if I just applied some simple marketing principles to it, then I could, grow the business to a point it would give me an income.
And so that moment when you thought, I've been doing what I've been doing, but now I feel like being a business person and buying a business and setting up a business, what was the spark for that?
I'd always felt there was an inner entrepreneur in me. And actually, I was extremely lucky that in my corporate job, I was head of new business development. So I was allowed to do sort of entrepreneurial projects within the business.
Yeah.
And the plus side of that was I had a huge corporate team behind me to help me.
Yeah.
The negative side of that is every time I wanted to do something, I had to justify it a million times and get it approved.
Yeah.
So for me, the major trigger was our business had been taken over in London again. And me and a lot of the management team just decided it was time to go to pastures new. And I had a young daughter and I was traveling a lot, and I decided it was time to focus more on the family. I wanted to do something local.
And why dry cleaning? What was the attraction of that?
Very good question, because I knew nothing about retail, nothing about running my own business, and nothing about dry cleaning. So why indeed? It was local. It was an asset purchase, so it was at the time it seemed relatively cheap. But what I really liked about it was the loyalty of the staff and the loyalty of the customers.
Right.
So what they did was really good. I just felt not enough people knew about it.
And obviously, when you said you bought the business, when you buy the business and then you're standing there looking at it as it is, what were the things that were popping into your mind about how can we turn dry cleaning into something that's a bit more, exciting, a bit more profitable, a bit more attractive to the market, as it were?
Yeah, the first thing was really about customer service. So I started I'd done some secret shopping when I was sort of looking to purchase the business. And, I definitely had staff that were fantastic. And there were a few staff who I didn't feel gave me that warm and fuzzy feeling when I walked into the shop. So there was, there was also a lot around enabling people. So there was a lot of internal conflict because although everybody was supposedly considered equal, there were some people that felt that they had more rights than others.
Right.
So I felt that really from a customer perspective, both the external customer and the internal customer in terms of the staff, that was where I needed to start. And actually I went to see John Timpson speak.
Yes.
And he spoke about inverting the hierarchy chart.
Yes.
And instead of having himself at the top, he was at the bottom and the customers at the top. And it was his Herculean task to support everything to deliver the customer the best service they could. And I love that idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now the customer is actually everything we do. If it doesn't benefit the customer or it doesn't ensure that the customer service is at the same level and improve the business performance, then there's no justification for making the change.
Yeah. And how big is the team that you're running at the moment then?
Well, currently we're 12 and we're running very thin on the ground because we're finding it incredibly hard to recruit.
Right. Is there, that's a challenge for almost all of my clients. And when they do find somebody that they think is right, then suddenly they're faced with a barrage of demands for flexible working and things like that. What are the main challenges that you're seeing in finding good people?
The main challenges are the stamina. It's a very physical job, cleaning, you're on your feet all day. And a lot of people come, you know, and we've had a few people come and then they say, do you know what, this is really hard work. I can go and find easier work elsewhere.
Okay.
So we've decided, we had a meeting with the team and the team just said, you know what, we'll just do longer hours, work harder. Let's just stick with what we've got for now.
Yeah.
The chemistry between the team is good. We all know what we're doing. And yeah, it's just really hard to recruit. So at some point, hopefully, the tide will turn and we will be able to get some new people in, because we'd love to train people up. But it's just really hard at the moment to find good people.
So reflecting back on those years that you've owned Peter's Cleaners, just thinking about the beginning, that first few years, what were the main challenges for you at that point? You're new to the business, you're new to the marketplace and the environment. You've talked about your focus on customer service, but what was the main challenge for you?
The main challenge for me, I think, was understanding the culture of the business. So I was the newbie, and I was stepping into a business where some people have been working in it for 40 years.
Right.
So, you know, what I didn't want to do was go in there and start, you know, putting my fist of authority down and upsetting people. That meant people with an incredible amount of knowledge was going to leave. And I'd never worked with, you know, I'd worked in a professional environment, and I'm not saying Peter's Cleaners isn't professional, but working in a factory with minimum wage people is a very different culture. So there was a big learning curve for me. I had to understand about dry cleaning. You know, what is it? A lot of people just don't know. I went on my boiler maintenance course, something I never thought I'd have on my CV. And yeah, so there was a huge learning curve, and just everything from learning how to do the day-to-day accounts in QuickBooks, understanding, you know, what was important. I think the biggest thing for me was the culture thing, what was important. So things that were important to me, the big picture, didn't necessarily matter to the people working in the factory.
Yes.
You know, they were far more excited by you buying the biscuits they liked. Making, you know, it was the little things that made the day-to-day difference to them. So previously they'd had to buy the biscuits and the milk for the coffee and things, whereas I sort of said, okay, let's have a petty cash tin and the business will pay for that now. And the goodwill from that small amount of spend was enormous.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I watched. Sorry, go on.
A tray of Dunkin' Donuts goes a long way.
Yes. Yeah. I was. People have been saying to me, "Why aren't you watching Ted Lasso on TV?" I don't know if you've seen it. And I watched the first episode last night. The first thing he did as the coach of the football club was to increase the pressure in the showers.
Yeah,
People have been complaining about that.
Yeah, and so it is those little things. You know, there was a lot of equipment because the business was going to close. There was a lot of equipment that hadn't been serviced properly. And that put a huge amount of stress on everybody because they came in just not knowing whether the boiler would fire up that day. So again, investing in the maintenance so that everybody went home feeling a lot more relaxed, knowing the next day they could come in and just turn everything on and it worked.
That's a fascinating piece of reality, but it also feels like a bit of a metaphor as well for fixing businesses and things. So let's just go back to culture for a second, because one of my clients did a culture workshop a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the difference between culture by accident, i.e. it just happens the way that the team builds it, or culture by design, where the business owner says, this is who we are, and this is what we do, and this is how we behave, and this is how we want to be seen. What was your approach to that?
I think culture is a very interesting thing because you can't change it overnight.
No.
In fact, again, I went to see somebody speak who dealt a lot with culture in their business, and they said it was a 5-year transition.
At least,
to truly, you know, change the culture.
Mm.
And I would agree. I mean, I would say we were well on the way, and then the whole rhythm of the business was upset by COVID.
Mm.
And then we sort of came back after COVID, and a lot of I would say, the old toxic culture reared its head again, and we almost had to start again. But really, yeah, I think, culture is set by the person at the top.
Yes.
You don't change culture by being a hypocrite.
Do as,
So,
do
if
as
you
I say,
truly,
not as I do.
yeah. So, I'm always happy if if I walk through the factory and I see people need help, if they're busy, I'm happy to do what I can. Often they don't want me to. Often they're like, no, we're fine, because I am
Yeah.
terrible at doing certain things.
Right.
But, if the van driver's sick, and I need to drive the van, I'll drive the van. I think sort of, especially in small business, there's no room for being precious. If people need a cup of tea, make them a cup of tea. If you're making a cup of tea, don't expect them to make you a cup of tea all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that, the fact that I get stuck in, they love that, and that sort of builds a bit of respect for me. But I think the thing that's really driven the culture is at the point they start seeing things are better because of it.
Yes.
So we had about an 18-month where there was a real battle against what I was trying to do, and a real disbelief that actually it would work. And then we had a couple of incidents, and one was around, actually, when I disciplined somebody who'd been in the business for 26 years for being rude and aggressive. And she just changed completely, and hadn't realized actually what her attitude was like and how she upset people. And I think that was a real turning point, because she changed, and then everyone else thought, gosh, okay, actually you can change things. And that's when people started getting behind it.
That's really interesting, because it leads me on to that question about high performing teams. And often we apply this mantra to boards of big companies or sports teams or things like that, but every single team is capable of high performance. As you change the culture in that way and showed people what kind of behaviors you expected, what happened to the performance of the team?
Well, the performance of the team, they're a really good team, and they've always wanted, they're very proud of what they do, and they've always wanted to do their best. They just weren't enabled to do that because of internal conflict, and because the equipment just wasn't up to scratch.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of performance now, well, I mean, if you look at our Trustpilot rating, we're the highest in the industry in the UK.
Yeah.
And I just make sure that all those positive things are fed back to them. That if people say, wow, the cleaning was amazing, that the team know that review went out. And I think the other thing was, things go wrong. People do make mistakes. And this was something that took me probably about 3 years to make people confident that they could put up their hand and say, you know what, I've made a mistake. And not sort of think they were going to get into trouble or about it. So, now if somebody makes a mistake, which is few and far between, but occasionally things do happen, then, it enables me to deal with it with the customer immediately. And we actually win better loyalty by our customers by being honest and dealing with things properly.
Yes. Yeah. That's really interesting, because one of the things that I say to my clients is that it's how people behave when things go wrong that can be a real indicator of their value to the business. Because if they do say, it was my fault, I'm responsible, let's work out how it happened and it won't happen again, that's a really positive approach. If they go, well, I don't understand why it happened, or it was somebody else's fault, or it was the fault of a circumstance or something like that, then you want those people out. So it's interesting that they've responded to your sort of cultural input in that way.
Yeah, and it's a hugely positive thing because, like I said, it's very, very few and far between. We
Mm,
clean about 85,000 items a year,
mm,
and I can count on my fingers, the number of items
mm.
that go to the point that actually it's genuinely our mistake rather than a manufacturing error, and
Yeah.
where we have to compensate the client. So it is a tiny, I mean, what I say to them is perfection is unachievable. 100% is unachievable.
Yeah.
So we go to 99.95% or 99.9%.
Yeah.
And so there is a margin for error,
Mm.
and that's fine.
And do you, I mean, again, some of my clients like to measure a lot in business, and they have dashboards and KPIs and things like that. When
Yeah.
you look at the way your business operates in terms of the throughput and the quality and things like that, how do you measure performance in your business?
Yeah, we started doing a lot more around the measurement performance when I got the investment
Hmm.
into the business post COVID. And it was something that then I had, new people on the board, and in terms of to see where the investors' money, what we
Mm.
were aiming for and how we were achieving against that. So this is around the sort of launching, the changing of the
Mm.
business, and launching our 24/7 drop off and pick up. So there's a lot more KPIs around that, but I'd always measured quality.
Hmm.
And in terms of quality, it was very simple. We can see from our till system how many items we clean. We can
Yes.
tell from, I know from the number that's been escalated to me, the number of recleans, the number of complaints, where we are in terms of level of service for that.
Yeah.
And then also, we look at things like our Trustpilot review.
Hmm. Yeah.
And yeah, just, you know, from the shop floor as well, comments that come back. And every now and again, I'm doing it on Wednesday this week, I like to work in a shop
Yes.
and actually talk to the clients and find
Mm.
out what they like. And it's a
Mm.
great, I think it's a great way to keep your feet on the ground.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. The America, no, not the American, the Army, the British Army call it walking the land. They're
Yeah.
often go out and walk the land, if you like. Yeah, absolutely vital. You mentioned there the investment and the slight sort of change post COVID, and I can't talk to you for half an hour without mentioning drop your trousers.
Yes.
Just tell me a bit about that and that kind of brand and how that impacted on the business.
Yeah, I mean, pre-COVID, I'd come up with this idea that people were very busy, and having been a commuter myself, I knew how hard it was to find a
Mm.
dry cleaners that was open at a convenient time. So I developed this 24/7 pod that was going to be at Peterborough Station, and then literally we put our first one in, and then 3 months later, COVID hit.
Mm.
And at that point, I had a decision to make. Did I continue funding the business because, as a dry cleaner, we were considered essential, so got very little help. We weren't in the
Right.
retail space that others were.
Mm.
Or, was it time to pack up and go home? And my husband and I spoke, and we decided that we really thought there was something in it, that the industry was desperately in need of a change, that I was onto something. So
Mm.
we put in some more money, but ultimately I needed outside investment.
Right.
And the drop your trousers came because I decided my real skill is talking to people and presenting to people. And because it
Mm.
was COVID, it was very hard to do that. So business angel groups and things weren't meeting.
Yeah.
So actually getting face to face with people to tell them about you and your business and your idea and your enthusiasm was really hard. So I
Mm.
made a decision to go for crowdfunding. And that is essentially a massive marketing exercise.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was not a marketing person. So I put out a call on LinkedIn, and I got this lady, Claire Gill, who contacted me. And I looked at her CV and I thought, wow, she's way too good for a little dry cleaners in Peterborough. And she kept coming back to me going, but I really want to. I really think I could do something well. So in the end, we struck a deal. And then she came up with drop your trousers,
Oh,
which
brilliant.
was followed by talk dirty to us.
Also good. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it certainly raised some eyebrows and got
Yeah.
some laughs. And I think sort of it really appealed to people in terms of what we were trying to do, something
Mm.
different.
Mm. And so as that developed, the pod at the station, clearly at that point in time in 2020 and 2021, probably not a viable thing. How's it turned out for you?
Still not a viable thing because trains are on strike and nobody's really commuting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the moment, we've pivoted. We're looking at lockers
Mm-hmm.
as a smaller, cheaper alternative. Still going with I mean, our mission is to disrupt the dry cleaning business to provide, excellent service and convenience for the customer.
Mm.
So whether that's through pods or whether that's through lockers, and I think it's, at the moment we're trying out both, and we're working out the customer journey, how the customer interacts with them, how the customer interacts with the technology that operates them in terms of an app and things, to learn really about what is the best solution. But it's very hard because I think the people's behavior isn't necessarily in a set pattern yet. People don't know whether they're going to be called back to work. People don't know whether they're going to be permanently working from home. So there's still this sense of, I think, post-COVID, businesses feel that people should be back, but they're frightened to put their foot down about it because it's an employer ease market.
Yes, it is. It is.
So until I still think we've got a sort of 2 or 3 years of working out actually where everything falls out and getting back into a normal pattern, which is really challenging when you're trying to, base a business on what the new pattern is.
Yeah, I mean, I live in this is my office in Peterborough, but I live in a rural village down near Huntingdon, and I look at the literally dozens of Amazon DPD and other courier vehicles that come in and out of my little close every day. And I'm thinking to myself, if I was, the ultimate convenience for me for dry cleaning is that, the doorbell rings and I hand over something, and a couple of days later, the doorbell rings and it comes back to me. Now, I expect to have to pay for that, but with the amount of traffic in terms of couriers and deliverers and things like that, I wonder if ever that could be a model.
Yeah, I mean, it goes down to what people are prepared to pay. So if I, on a pair of trousers, we might make, I don't know, between 75 pence and £1 profit. So if we send a van out to your rural location in Huntingdon, and there's a suit and a pair of trousers to pick up and not much else on the way back, then it quickly becomes a charitable service rather than a business model. So the idea about the lockers and the pods is at some point you probably do make a trip out, whether that's to the supermarket or to a shopping area to go and get some new shoes or something like that. And so if things are in a convenient place where you go, it might be a garage forecourt where you fill up every time. But if it's in something that fits in with your day-to-day life or your weekly routine, then you just think, well, I'm going to fill the car up with petrol, so I'll drop my dry cleaning off at the same time. So that's what we're looking at. I think we've looked at, could we go through something like Amazon or something? But the problem is, I don't trust them to not crease your clothes and deliver it back in the way it should be.
Yeah. What went through my head as you were talking then was Tesco's and Sainsbury's and Ocado, going out to deliver stuff to people all the time and partnering with one of those to get access to the fleet. But you're right, you wouldn't want your suit smelling of vegetables or
no. And I think they're sort of at the point, and we're working all kinds of ideas at the moment, and one of them is a sort of door to door, but that would be a very premium service. But we're full of ideas, but you just got to make sure you don't get too distracted and you're following the course you want to follow. But in terms of the door to door, there isn't a business yet that has taken that for a model that's making money.
No, I can imagine. So let's just think more generally then about, I mean, you've highlighted some of the ideas there, but I always like to ask the question about where do you want to take the business in the next few years? You've got a board of directors you mentioned. What's the vision for the next 4 or 5 years for Peter's Cleaners?
The vision is to disrupt, there's very few businesses that are actually making a profit in dry cleaning.
Yes.
largely because the price point is very low and costs have been spiraling, specifically wages, and obviously over the last year, energy costs.
Yes.
So the vision is really to find the model that gives the customer the convenience and the service and the quality of cleaning that they're happy with at a price point they're happy with, in a as I said, a convenient way that fits in with their day-to-day lifestyle, and then expand.
Yes.
So
geographically, you mean?
yes, and whether that's through a licensing model, a franchising model, or organic growth, will depend on ultimately the model that falls out of the bottom of all the things we're trying.
Yes.
And the data we're gathering and the evidence. And so yes, so we feel that there is definitely an opportunity. I mean, the market is hugely fragmented. 98% of companies are one or two people businesses. So it's a massively fragmented market. But nobody's really making any money. So something's got to change.
Do you think is there an attitude shift towards dry cleaning generally? Are we talking about, more disposable view of life? Is there something in the market that's going to affect that? The standards?
Yeah, I think pre-COVID, there was a move to the fashion industry was seen as very destructive for the environment. And there was a move towards, buying good clothes, looking after them, that would have definitely worked in favor of the dry cleaners. Unfortunately, with COVID, we saw not so many people wearing suits, but then we saw lots of dry cleaners clothes. So I think sort of for dry cleaners like us that have survived, we're actually extremely busy. Because the oversupply of cleaners has been balanced out with a slight fall in demand. But we're also seeing now, which is a slight challenge, which I hope is a blip, that the cost of living crisis has sort of moved people away from really, I think, caring about the environment, because the need is just to survive at the moment. So, I think we're going to see the sort of cheap throwaway culture survive for a little longer than we would have done.
That is interesting, because all of those external factors are going to impact on the way the business develops. And the other question I always like to ask, because I think it is a very interesting view of business development and business growth, is when you look at the next 5 years for Peter's Cleaners, what does that mean for you personally? How do you approach personal development? How will you change over the next 5 years?
Oh, now that is a good question. How am I going to change? I think I'm learning. I'm very lucky. I've got an investor, a key institution investor. So I got some money from crowdfunding, and then got an institutional investor as well. They're hugely supportive. And also on the board, I have 2 other people who are very experienced, who have taken businesses and sold them. And so, I mean, ultimately, it's about building value and learning from them, and understanding really how we can take the business and develop it to have sustainable profitability and a good growth model. And for me, I've never done that before. So that's learning about that and everything that goes along with it.
Are you a learner? Are you an avid consumer of material?
I'm a sponge. I wouldn't say I'm not a great sort of person who spends hours and hours and hours reading business books. If I find something that's of interest, so when I thought, right, I'm going to crowdfund, I then research, and I like audiobooks when I'm walking the dogs or something like that, and I'm in the car or something. But I like researching things rather than reading. I actually prefer sort of finding it out for myself, if that makes sense. And I am definitely an external thinker. So
Right.
I love bouncing ideas off people.
Mm.
In fact, so sometimes people just go, stop, because, you know, I'm like, what about this? What about this? We could do this. Da, 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 da. So,
Yep.
you know, it's, yeah, I'm definitely a bounce idea and talk things through. And I find that sitting down with people and talking it through helps me filter my thought process. And then all of a sudden, clarity comes.
Yes. That's good advice, actually, Vicky. That's good advice for business owners, because often I see people kind of hunkered down in their own little bunker, and they get their own kind of world going, and they get their own thoughts going. And it's not until they bounce it off somebody else and suddenly get an external perspective that makes a difference. So, yeah, that's part of my job, of course. But so let's finish off. I've got again a bit of an awkward question, but I always like to ask it, because I'm now taking you back to 2017, and you're thinking about the business, and you're thinking about setting up, and there's a lot of excitement around that. You know, knowing what you know now,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to the younger Vicky in that position?
What advice? I think I would have said, listen to your father, because he
Right.
told me, when you do your business plan, half the revenue, half the revenue you get, double the costs, and take the timeline 2 times over. And if you've still got something that you can cash flow, then you've got a business model. I suppose the pessimism, I'm a naturally optimistic, bouncy person.
Yeah.
And the pessimism isn't something that, well, wouldn't even say pessimism, I said the reality.
The pragmatism.
But what I will say is, I don't think even the biggest pessimist could have foreseen things like COVID,
No.
the cost of living crisis, Putin going into the Ukraine, you know, so sometimes ignorance is bliss.
Okay.
If I'd known everything I know now, would I have done it? Probably not. If I'd known how hard the 3 years during COVID would be, how much of our personal money we'd have to put in to prop up the business, how long it would take, that I'm at 7 years, where, you know, now where really in a normal world, I'd probably have hit this after 3 or 4 years sort of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's been very, very hard. But then I have days like yesterday where, you know, I'm so excited about what we're doing. And I just think, I don't think working for anyone else I'd ever get a buzz like that.
No.
So
I think I'm pretty unemployable now, frankly, having had my own business for 5 years. So yeah.
Oh, it's an interesting thing, because I think there's things you learn. I think you learn more, certainly towards people that run businesses. There's definitely more empathy and understanding about the pressure and roles that would probably, as an employee, make you far more supportive of them. But on the other hand, it's not so easy for you to take instruction.
That's true. Or be told where to be and when. That the time thing for me would be the biggest problem.
Yeah.
Because I control my own time now completely, which is great. Yeah. Vicky, I could pick a dozen brilliant pieces of advice out of that you've given to business owners and people who are starting up. So it's been fascinating to listen to the story of Peter's Cleaners, listen to the ideas that you've got on what's coming in the future. So let me just say again, thank you very much for spending some time with me today on the Business Spotlight. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.